So yeah, the main menu that we'll be dealing with is the MoGraph menu here. We'll be starting by seeing cloner, and for simplicity I'll be just omitting some of them for now, and in the coming weeks we can also see the other ones. So these things that are existing here also exist here, which is the MoGraph similar menu, like cloner, matrix scatter, fracture, Voronoi fracture. We'll be seeing cloner, Voronoi fracture, and tracer, and later on we can dive into the other aspects of it also. So since this is a generator which is a green object, what green objects need? A child, right? So if I add a cube and make this cube a child of it, you can see that it seems to be still a wider cube, but actually there are many cubes there. So I just need to select that cube and select the scale tool and click somewhere on the viewport and drag to decrease the size. So as you can see, by default it has created 9 cubes, which are all instances of the same cube. What cloner does is it replicates or duplicates the properties of this throughout either a grid or over an object or a volume of an object and that kind of stuff. So if I change the properties of this cube through this attributes panel, you see each one of them starts to change. So let's change to the lines mode of grout shading. So if I increase segments of it, all of them is segmented more. So you can think of it like the exact twins of this cube are generated all the time. Okay, so again, as the other parametric objects or generators in Cinema 4D, if you click on the cloner and in the attributes panel objects tab, you can see that there are different kinds of properties again. First we can start with the mode here. You can, for example, change the mode to linear, and for example, let's see, do something like this. It seems to be doing something weird, but it's related to the, of course, again, the size of the cube. So let's make this smaller. By the way, if you want to change multiple values very easily, you can, for example, write a value here, hit tab on your keyboard, and write another value and hit tab, and by doing so, you can easily change, for example, 50, 50, 50. You can easily change values very fast. So let's make it 30, 30, 30. Okay, and increase the segments. So if I change the mode to linear and change the count of it, you can see how I can control immediately how many cubes are generated. So linear is something like this, and for how much it has moved is determined by the values here. So this cloner object instructs these cubes to move 50 centimeters in the Y direction, which is the vertical direction. So if I change that, I can adjust the spacing between these cubes. So I can drag this down and increase something like this. So I can immediately create something like this. Okay. And also there are, of course, different properties, like at each step or at each clone, this rotation also instructs these cubes to rotate at each step. So let's make it not so. So let's make it rotate 3 degrees at each step. See, or 0 in this direction, but 3 degrees in this direction. So if I increase the count, you can see that it becomes something like a twisted tower or something like similar. See? So while playing with these numbers, if you're not sure about what you're doing, don't try to change everything at once, but zero all of them, but only change one of them each time, so that you can understand what that value is doing to the system that you generated, okay? So you can also play with scaling, of course. And also you can also make them move in different directions, so that it becomes something like a stairs. Maybe I moved it too much, like this, maybe scaling is too harsh. Or I can make the default cube a little bit wider. Notice that I'm changing the properties of the cube, but everything is responding to that. So if this was, for example, 100 centimeters wide, and this was 100%, now like the cube was 100% wide, 100 centimeters wide, and all of the clones are now 100 centimeters wide. But if I scale this in the cloner with this, for example, let's say 150, so each clone starts to get multiplied by 150%. So each step is 150% larger than the previous step. Okay? So, but I recommend that you don't use this scale here either, because they can cause problems of while stretching your objects too much, maybe sometimes. Okay. So let's see some other types. By the way, I can zero these out, and when I zero these out, you can see that it seems as if there is a single object, but as soon as I move this towards a certain direction, you can see that there are many of them, which is determined by this count number here. Okay, so let's do again like this. So there is also another step mode here, which allow you to rotate things. And notice how this is a little different from the rotations that are here. So if I rotate from here, it changes each clone's rotation. This is very similar to this, but the other ones are working a little bit different. Okay, so this means that at each step it is rotated at like 9 degrees or such. Okay, so there is another mode of this step mode, like single value means like at each clone it's rotated 9 degrees more, but if it's cumulative, it's, notice how different the functionality becomes. So it starts to act much differently. So by using this mode, I can maybe animate some growth patterns by using curves, or I don't know. I can combine this with leaves and that kind of stuff, so maybe nature-inspired geometries can come out of this. Okay, this is the linear mode of the cloner. There's also another mode called radial. Radial is like, of course, like it clones your objects over a circle or something like that. So let's make this again a cube, like 30, 30, 30 maybe. By the way, you can change of course, the dimensions of your cube object from here, but you can always go here, and while the object is selected, you can go to the scale tool and hit somewhere in your viewport and scale them up and down. So again, I can go to the cloner, change the radius of the cloned objects, and increase the count, increase or decrease the count. Notice that again there's a plane here which allows you to adjust over which plane these clones are generated. And this radial mode also has this start angle and end angle properties. Like for example, if you want to maybe rotate only 90 degrees, you want to make an arch like thing. Okay. And also you can offset your, let's make it 360 again. You can offset, you can offset your clones like this and randomize the offset amount so that they are distributed randomly over that area. Okay. So this is the radial mode, and the grid mode is by default the initial mode that you have, which we saw in the beginning. When you add a cloner in your scene and add a child to it, it's by default in the grid mode. So that has a grid means like, of course, something like this. And you can also clone in the third dimension. So this allows you to generate thousands of things with a single click. And notice that what will happen if I increase this too much. So this is 100, let's make it 100 by 100. So now you can see that I can barely move this, I can barely pan around this viewport because there are so many of those cubes that it starts to take more and more time for the computer to calculate the rotation and the position of each one of them. Okay, so this power comes at a cost, so use it responsibly. So this is probably like, the number of those cubes is 100 by 100 multiplied by 100 multiplied by 5, okay, which is 10,000, 50,000. There are 50,000 cubes here. And I immediately created 50,000 cubes by only adding a single generator there. So let's make it even higher by, let's say, by 50. Now it's 500,000, I guess. Yes. Now there are 500,000 cubes. I can't rotate the viewport. Okay, of course this is related to the power of your computer, but I never recommend this because it's not an efficient way of doing things. So if your viewport starts to become so heavy, then it means you're doing something wrong, or maybe you are working on a very ambitious project. So don't, if you have such problems, try to search for what you're doing wrong. But of course, like Cloner also has some workarounds for situations like this. By default, this cloner has the instance mode called instance, but there are render instance and multi-instance options also. So these options, these two options, allow you to use the cloning operation in a more efficient way. So let's change to render instance and let's see what will happen. Okay, at least I started to be able to rotate this viewport a little when this is render instance. But let's change it, okay. Yeah, I can barely move around there. So let's try multi-instance. I don't know if it will make a difference. Oh, yeah. So there are 500,000 cubes there. 500,000 cubes. And I can rotate all of them like this. So okay, so keep in mind this render instance and multi-instance works in these very complex scenes, but they also cause some problems, or they also come with some limitations. We'll be seeing them in the future coming weeks. So for now, just keep in mind that this cloner has this instance mode that allow you to generate these clones in a much more efficient way. Okay? So just drag this down to the sane amounts. Not insane, but let's 20 by 20 by 20 clones. Okay, notice that how it became much easier to pan around, even with the instance mode. So to some extent, you don't recognize or understand the difference between the performance of these objects or your scenes, but after some time, when it becomes too complicated or complex scenes, it will become much more evident. And also performance-wise, I'll also show you another example which I was talking in the past weeks. Like, remember when I said use these segments responsibly? So I'll go to the display grout shading lines mode to be able to see the segments here. So now, as I increase the segments here, okay, it doesn't seem to be doing something. So as I increase the segments, after some time, it will again become heavy. See? So although I don't increase the number of the clones, when I increase the number of the divisions here, it starts to become heavier and heavier and heavier. So if you are using a very complex geometry, or for example a 3D scanned object, be careful of these numbers or the polygon counts. Like, these are all called polygons, as you can remember. All these tiny rectangles here, or let's say squares here. As the number of that increases, the performance of your scene will decrease. Okay, keep in mind that. Be mindful about that also. So, what this seems to be not okay. You can do some clones of the same thing, but what's the use of this, you might say? Right? So we'll be seeing that with the use of the effectors, but let me show you first another operation mode of the cloner, which is the honeycomb mode, which allows you to arrange them in a honeycomb pattern. Let's transform this like that. Okay. By the way, another property of this cloner is you can put inside multiple objects. If I put this sphere, so it immediately starts to shuffle between these two objects. One sphere, one cube. Like the order is like this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It goes like that, like a grid. So first it starts with sphere and cube, sphere, cube, sphere, cube. Okay. So I can add even more. Let's add a cone. See? So I can change the cone's orientation to Z or minus Z, let's say. Okay. But this time it started to do, okay, the ordering is probably like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or it's going like that probably. So let's add which one? A torus maybe. Now it starts with a torus, and I'll change the orientation like this. Okay, so I can immediately start to create even patterns out of these 3D geometries, right? So I'll just play with the spacing of it, maybe. Cube. No. No, let's make it okay, 200 by 50, 200 by 50. Okay, so for now I'm seeing that this is too ordered, right? 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, or something like that. But also, let me change the spacing a little. Okay. So, but I want it to be a little bit more randomized. So let's, okay, we've seen the honeycomb structure, right? So I'll just change to the grid mode again. So you can see that how it changes. So I'll decrease the number in one direction, or let's, okay. So notice that the difference between is like they are not shifted in the honeycomb pattern, like they are not aligned on hexagons, but it's a completely regular grid here. So I will change the spacing. Okay. Now you can see how they are very neatly organized over that grid. Okay. So, but now I'm thinking of it like they are too ordered, right? Like they go all in a predictable way. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. I want it to be distributed more randomly, maybe, right? So in the cloner, there is this clones property, which is by default set to iterate. Okay. If I change it to random, I can now see that these are all randomly placed. I'll prove that by changing this seed number here, which is, you can think of the seed value in many properties as rolling a dice and creating a random number or random placement or random state of the system that you're generating, right? So if I change the seed, you can see that each seed value gives me a completely different set of alignments, right? So I can drag this, and these are all different random placements, different design options maybe, right? So you develop a system and think of this as a city maybe. You have a city and you've designed a city and you want a different different placement of these buildings maybe. So you change the seed value and there's a completely different alignment, arrangement of these things, okay? Also, the clones mode also has a different property called blend. Blend means like it divides or it transitions between this object. It starts with this object, and according to the clone amount you have, it evenly distributes the number of the clones to the grid that you have, okay? So that's another way of using it. And sort, I'm not sure about the sort, I don't remember that. So probably this works with another option, but I'm not sure about that for now. So yeah, let's try this with, I'll multiple selecting them and dragging them out of the cloner, okay? And I can click and drag like this to easily disable or enable all of them at once, okay? Clicking and dragging. So now I'll just add an end side inside the cloner. This cloner also works with splines. Any object you put inside the cloner is multiplied, okay? So notice that how it can become easy to create patterns with cloner. So let's, for example, add a square also, rectangle, and add a circle. And let's play with spacing. Okay. And of course, like the other properties still count, like let's say let's pass on to the linear mode again. Make this 0. And you can, maybe radial mode can work better for this. You can change the plane to this, okay? So you can easily create mandala-like things by increasing, decreasing patterns like this. And also you can export these as illustratable files, okay? So instead of, I'm just dragging those out. So with an end side, which is by default a hexagon, I can immediately create some geometric patterns. And the beauty of it is like, it's completely procedural, so you can always control how they are generated, how complex they are, or how simple they are, right? So of course, like you can again start with these angle things. Each of these parameters allow you to animate this system that you generated, okay? So in the cloner, you also have a transform panel which allow you to rotate the clones, right? So although initially they were lying flat on a plane, if I use the cloner's transform tab here, and if I play with that, Notice how it changes the plane of that. Okay. So these allow you to create very beautiful procedural systems that allow you to animate very easily. So if I increase the clone amount, the count number here, it starts to become something like a mesh or woven structure. And then I go to the transform and rotate that. And notice this form appearing here, as if it's like a done out of ropes in a 3D space, right? So very easy system and seemingly very complex visuals, right? But the rule is very simple. I've just cloned this end side, and now I'm just rotating all of these clones at once in 3D space in a specific direction. But look how, I don't know, intricate it has become, right? Of course, the beauty of it is I can always combine these with different things, objects. So I've just added a circle also. So notice that how some of them are circles and some of them are n-gons. So it hasn't changed that much, but let's try and see. So let's even make this more. Okay, so I'll just undo that. And instead of, okay, just I can also show you this. Instead of so out of clones, I can maybe change those cones like this and change the number of it. And again, I can rotate these cones like this or like this. Like this. So I can combine them with other geometry again. So this is too much maybe. Yeah, so let's try some again pattern-like things. I'll just disable them. Cloner, grid mode, or since they are hexagons, I can go to the honeycomb mode and create literally a honeycomb like this, honeycomb pattern, right? So very easy to do. And of course, this transform property still works, but notice how each clone is rotated. Maybe, for example, I can rotate this 30 degrees, and after I rotate it 30 degrees, since they are aligned with each other, notice how traditional patterns, tile patterns, can come out of this, right? So it's all rule based actually. So you define a rule and then play with it. So also there's an offset value here. It allows you to play with the offsetting amount. And let's make it 60 degree and see if something changes. Yes, of course it changes. I can go and play again with the spacing and see how different tiles arise from that. You can maybe notice them from some marble companies, patterns, or traditional tiling ways, which are again based from geometric rules. Okay, so if I make it an octagon, of course I need to go and change the this value to a different thing, maybe again 30 degrees, no, 20 degrees, let's say, and then play with the spacing. So you can immediately make geometric patterns out by using those cloner objects. Okay, so let's take a break, and then I'll be showing you some other tricks and the part which allows you to control all of the clones like a God mode thing or something like that. So these effectors allow you to control these clones in very creative ways. So we'll see how to use them. Until now, do you have any questions or comments? Or did you like the cloner or not? Anyone hated this? Yeah, this is a lot actually. So you'll need to play with it and ask me questions if you have, okay? So let's take a 10-minute break and see you in 10 minutes.